A national university education is all about opportunity. Named a Money Magazine Best Value College, with over 100 degree programs online or on campus, and one course per month classes, you can get started sooner and finish faster and begin leaving your mark on the world. National University. Visit nu.edu to learn more and get started.
Attention, Steve! Everyone! They're here already! You're next!
Let's go! Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born!
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So I guess it was like my uncle. My uncle used to be a DJ on 96 WCMF in Rochester, New York, where my parents are from and where I lived for like just a teeny tiny bit of my very early life. But I think that listening to my uncle on the radio, well, he wasn't even on the radio anymore. He just had tapes. But it was listening to my uncle be on the radio through these old tapes of his that made me fall in love with radio. You and I have talked about this in the past, but the magical thing about radio is now, and I think always has been, the fact that when you need someone to keep you company, radio is just about enough. And I used to listen to old tapes of my uncle on the radio and my uncle's radio station, and they would keep me company. And then other radio stations in England where I grew up kept me company. And, well, I just ultimately, I think, wound up on the radio because I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be able to give you a companion when you needed it, share music and laughs and conversation when you needed it. And that's sort of why I'm here. But I'll never forget, one of the first things I ever heard was a countdown on 96 WCMF in Rochester, which is funny. I talked to my uncle about this a little while ago. He's like, yeah, what's crazy is they're playing the exact same music now as when I was on in the 70s and 80s. He was like, it was just rock then. Now it's classic rock, but the playlist hasn't changed in 30 years. And I remember listening to this countdown. I think it was a countdown of the top 96 songs of 1982 or something. And there's this one song on there. This one Tom Petty song. And that was my introduction to Tom Petty. I never heard him before. But it had this really kind of cool keyboard intro. That song, Good Love. Good love is hard to find. You got lucky, babe. I found you. And then I really like the way Tom Petty scoops into his words. Like this. It's cool. But I loved it. And I'd never heard anything like it. And I listened to it over and over again. And from there, I kind of like came across Tom Petty left, right, and center. And I guess I've been a fan for pretty much the entirety of my life because of that one listening experience. I got to see Tom Petty live last night for the first time ever at a festival called Kaboo in Del Mar, California. And I became a fan of his music very early on. And the desire to see him live was something I started having when I was probably about 8 years old. And so in these situations, there tends to be a certain amount of buildup that is nigh on impossible to live up to. If someone's had an idea in their mind, a fantasy of what it would be like to see a band play since they were 8 years old, by the time they get there, well into adulthood, there's a very good chance that that performance is not going to live up to the hype that already exists in your brain. Well, Tom Petty lived up to absolutely every expectation. It was perfect. I think the only thing that I would have changed about it is that he would have played for a little longer and he would have gotten to some of the songs that I loved so much that he didn't have a chance to play. But it was amazing. It was sheer perfection. 40 years. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers have been going 40 years. And for the vast majority of that 40 years, they've been one of the biggest bands on the face of the planet. Not only did they get there, but they've stayed there for an inordinately long amount of time. And when they take the stage, it's this big rock machine with legacy and history and tons of expensive production and tens of thousands of people showing up to every single show, knowing every single word, singing along to every single song, people having major, major moments with every single piece of music that's played because it somehow wound up as part of the soundtrack to their life. It is absolutely unbelievably incredible what they've managed to do and be and sustain for so many years. And what was incredible about it was that partway through the set, the now nearly 70-year-old Tom Petty takes a second to introduce every single member of the band. It's funny. Their drummer, Steve Ferrone, he was like, yeah, people are still calling him the new guy, even though he's been playing drums with us for 24 years. But the thing that amazed me was when he was introducing every single member of the band, really struck me, is the fact that, well, he told the story of how Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers became a thing. And in that is a tremendous lesson for all of us.
Let's start the show. Real radio. 104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
So, like I said, for the very first time ever, after having been a fan since I started listening to the radio as a wee strip of a lad, I got to see Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers last night at Kaboo in Del Mar, and it was perfect. There's every chance that if you've built something up in your mind since you were 8 years old, by the time you roll around to adulthood, it will not live up to your expectations. Tom Petty lived up to every last expectation, and it was awesome. Put on an absolutely incredible show. Every single song packed with personal history for every one of the tens of thousands of people in the audience. Every single song was a soundtrack to somebody's life. And it was amazing. And the band was big, and it was filled with backing singers, and there was an incredibly complicated and complex light show and big screens, and I'm sure it takes a cast of many, many to put this show on. There's probably roadies running all over the place. Probably each band member has their own tour bus. It's probably there's private jets involved in flying these people in. And this has been going on for 40 years. And like I said, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers they've not only been around for 40 years, but they have been huge for 40 years. They never wound up on that sort of like regrettable state fair. Well, actually, a lot of state fairs are like really big deals now, but they never sort of wound up on that regrettable nostalgia kind of non-vital portion of the live concert industry. You know those bands. They've been done for a long time, but they'll happily trot out the hits every single summer to make their mortgage payments. That's not what Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers are. They really, really mean something. And that's something that you only really fully appreciate when you see them do their thing live. But what amazed me, and where I think the lesson is for all of us, is that despite the history, despite the legacy, despite the 40 straight years of packing out stadiums, despite everything that this band and their songs have become to millions upon millions of people all over the world, when old Tom was introducing every member of the band, he saved their guitar player, a guy called Mike Campbell, for last. And he said that years ago, he found an ad in a local paper for a guitar player and had a friend drive him to meet this guy, this guitar player. And he said it wasn't like a bad neighborhood. It wasn't like one of the lousy neighborhoods in and around his hometown of Gainesville, Florida. It was the worst neighborhood that he'd ever been in. And when he went to meet this guy that he'd spoken to on the phone after seeing an ad in the paper for a guitar player, or maybe it was the other way around, but when he went to meet this guy, his friend that drove him to the meeting into the worst neighborhood he'd ever seen said, I'm not going in. I am not going into that house. I'm going to stay here with the engine running so that you can get away when you need to get away. And you better take my gun. And he's like, why would I take your gun? He's like, do you have your gun? He's like, no, I don't really carry a gun. And he's like, well, you need one for this. This is unbelievably sketchy. He said he didn't need the gun. He went in to the guy's house, and he said he was playing an electric guitar that he bought for $2.50 at a pawn shop. And he was like, I'm not saying it was like a $2.50 guitar. Literally, this guitar cost this guy $2.50. But then we plugged in, and we started playing, and we played Johnny Be Good. And I turned to him, and he's like, I don't even know your name, but you're going to be in my band for life. And that was this dude, Mike Campbell. And it really struck me that if there's something you want to do with your life, if there's someone you want to be, something you want to achieve, somewhere you want to go, all of this, all of the record labels, the millions of albums sold, the millions of people that have bought tickets and T-shirts and all of the above, the massive production that it is when Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers roll into town over 40 years later. All of it started with Tom Petty showing up to a really sketchy neighborhood and jamming with a guy that had a $2.50 guitar. Unbelievably humble beginnings. And there's so many people that I'm sure contributed along the way. But it really struck me that if there's something you want to do, if there's something you want to be, if there's something you want to achieve or somewhere you want to go in this world, the trick is, the secret is to start now, to start today. And it almost doesn't matter how you start, where you start. But you'll never get there if you don't take that first step. There's a lesson that I learned last night watching this band of incredible weight and significance touch all of our lives with their music. And it all started with that one step.